Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Tabletop RPG Showcase. I am Steven,
Yeah.
and tonight we are joined by the creator of the game we're looking at, Age Past, the Incian Sphere, and the creator is Jeff Mechlinski, joining us tonight. This
Oh,
game was published out in. This is the revised version published in. When was it published, Jeff?
geez,
2017. Wow.
2018.
Very recent, rather recent game considering some of the ones that we've looked at are over a decade old.
Originally published in 2013 and did revised.
Yeah. So, Jeff, why don't you tell us a little bit about Age Pass and then we'll start digging into it.
So, Age Past is a high fantasy RPG set in a sort of gritty, dark world that has the largest shard of God's heart that ended up coalescing material and forming a planet. Basically, planet at its core has a very high magical concentration, and any living creature can harness, even non-living creatures, but like the elements themselves, but can harness this magic. And the magic does all kinds of crazy stuff. It enhances and accelerates evolution. It allows everyone to take advantage of it and use it. So everyone has some sort of like magical capacity to some degree. And I've tried to create a world that sort of works around that, like as if you were to create a world from the ground up that evolves around and having a lot of magic. However, the magic is fleeting because it's all energy based. So you gain it, it envelops you, you spend it, it runs out, and you then have to then spend it again. So there is no like permanency or anything like that.
Right. All right. So let's start digging into the game, and I guess we start where we always start, which is the setting. So the game is set in the Incian Sphere, a one of the major the major continents, I guess you'd call it, of the world of Terra's. And this is, like you said, is the magic one. I was pulling up a map here. So there's the Incian Sphere, uh, the which is near the Shard Crest, and you got the Hokate Sphere, the Everguards, the Shallows, the Ezekiel Sphere, and the Suntar Sphere are the other three spheres, which I believe there are going to be books coming out for. But this core book is focused around the Incian Sphere, aka the magic one.
Yes, yeah, and it also has all the rules to play the game.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, the Incian Sphere is your pretty typical high fantasy world. You got your human lands, you got your dwarf lands, you got your elf lands, you got orcs to the north. But I kind of like it because despite being pretty much standard high fantasy fare, there is actually a good amount of intrigue and political stuff, as well as plenty to do just baked into the setting itself. You want to talk about that a bit, Jeff?
Yeah, right. So as I mentioned before, the magic of the world enhances evolution, enhances growth, and it infuses animals with like magic. So you have wilderness itself is extremely deadly. In fact, the individual towns, have to beat back the growth of the forest because it just grows so fast. And that can allow places to become isolated, even like larger cities from other larger cities. So you just have the wilderness as a factor, and um, then have the political landscape. And basically, it's the elves, humans, and dwarves, they're called the Alliance of Dawn, and they have very tenuous relationship. The humans have the largest. They're the largest power, one of the largest powers in the world, actually, not just the sphere, but and um, they have very commerce oriented, right? Where the elves are kind of secluded and the dwarves are industrious, but they kind of are gruff and they kind of underground and stay themselves. Three are only allied because there are greater threats, like the orcs, which are constantly invading, and there are tons of orc tribes or clans that see the mainland. They're kind of on the other side of the sea. They see the mainland as is like their birthright. So they're sort of honor bound to take it back from humans, and some of that area is also elves and dwarves. And you also have the technological man. So the technological man, as opposed to magic man, right? Magic man is the Incian Sphere. And the reason I call them spheres is because they're almost like bubbles. It is a continent, but the continents are very hard to move from one continent to another due to very large geographical obstacles, such as a very large and tall mountain range, or basically a shard like basalt like shards that come up to the surface of the sea. The ships can't sail through. Some can get through, so there is limited trade and limited commerce between spheres, but it's very, very, very dangerous and very hard to do, and to some degree regulated. So you have this, the technological people want the magic, and the magic people want the technology, and I have the year set in around 1815, give or take. And that is what we should sort of look at, like our, as Earth, sort of take that as like the alternate timeline. So basically when you play the game, we have this concept called the castle on a needle, and it's just sort of balancing this beautiful, wonderful, magnificent castle is just teetering on this very tip of this needle, and any slight push could cause the whole thing to push down. That is an analogy for the Alliance of Dawn. The dwarves are doing things the elves don't like, the elves are doing things the dwarves don't like, the humans are doing things no one likes, right? And so we bake some of the, and this goes back to like standard fandom and nerddom, where, you know, elves don't like dwarves, but I gave it a reason. There was a war, the dwarves took most of the casualties in this war, the elves, who are their allies, took most of like the loot, and so now dwarves don't trust elves because of that, and they're very proud. So some of that stuff is like baked in to the world.
Yeah, I actually really appreciate that sort of castle on a needle feel of the game, because it actually gives a reason, and it gives agency to both players and GM, because the whole thing is teetering and balance, but players can, by their actions, can make things teeter one way or another, and actually affect real big changes in the world based on what they're doing. But at the same time, the GM can also introduce elements that can tip the balance heavily one way or another, that the players can then either choose to assist or try to stop in order to maintain that balance.
Right. So, for example, in one of the expansion books that that's now delayed due to COVID, but we should be coming out soon, there is this mining company that is extracting this like rare and magical material and is smuggling it to the dwarves. And if anyone finds out about that, it's like bad news, because it's that those are kind of things that can throw the whole relationship out of balance.
Exactly. So, okay, so that's the setting. Is there any other interesting bits of the setting that we want to talk about?
There's the concept of the age past. The game is called Age Past, but there's the concept of age past, where all of the heroic characters, all the PCs, the characters that the players play, in future's time, so 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, they're in the history books for being part of something. So your characters, when they're out adventuring, whether they slay the dragon or whether they rescue the princess or whether they uncover the ancient, age-shifting home, that leads to some sort of, not necessarily cascade effect, but that leads to some sort of important pivotal moment, and that the history knows in the future what that is. That means all the characters are important to the history of game, right? Or that hasn't been told yet. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That adds into the players actually have that direct control. Like they're already known to have done something. Let's figure out what that is through play, which I think is kind of cool, really cool concept.
Yeah, I do like that too. Like I said, it gives players agency, it gives them ability and reason to do big things instead of just sort of be passive at the table, as it were.
Characters also do have story points called domain. It could be used as standard luck, so if you just want to play a combat-oriented role, you could use it as a reroll or get extra damage or something. But it can also be used as story points. And every character has their own design, and you can spend a story point to basically force your design into the story at that point. uses, there's a guy, you'll get information from him, but your partner kills him, right? One of your allies or team members kills him. You can say, I'm going to spend a story point. He's not actually dead. He tells me what I need to know through his dying breath.
Yeah. So let's get, so speaking of which, let's get into character creation. That's usually where we go next with it before getting into game mechanics, but that is definitely one I think we could explore more. So when you're making when you're first making your character, the first, like, and this is something I actually really appreciate about Age Past here, is on page, what was it, 36, yeah. You have a step-by-step how to make a character with page references for each step, so you can follow along, find where you need to be, and make your character and be easily guided through the whole process. It is so convenient. Like, it is the most convenient thing, and I wish every game had this.
So one of the things about the game is that it is a 400-page book, but it's a lot of options, right? And most of the options you don't really need to know until you need to know them. So what I tell people is, it's a 400-page book, but you only need to read 25 pages. You just need to figure out what those 25 pages are, and they're basically the ones that are listed here.
Yeah.
Step by step. Yeah.
So let's go through the steps. So the first thing that you do is you choose an archetype and design. And the archetype is basically, can be anything, but it basically is a summation of your character in a few words or a sentence.
So it could be like I'm a Crimson Inquisitor, which is like a vampire hunting inquisitor, right, or something like that, right,
or a daring acrobat, or a charming bard, or a talented elementalist, whatever. Insert thing here. And what I kind of like about that is, like, it helps guide your character creation to know, like, okay, well, if I'm this, then I should be able to do these things. And so it gives you a core concept to work with. But also, the other thing that I like is that it does have mechanical benefits, because, as is said on that page, if you're doing a role related to something that your archetype would know how to do, then it's easier for you.
Assuming people remember the role.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's supposed to be the player's job to remember.
Yeah.
So, basically, if you're a thief and you do something thievy, you get like a +2. It's not a +2 bonus, but the check is like 2 points easier.
Exactly. And then the other thing is your design, which is basically an overarching goal for your character, which, again, I really appreciate when games have something like this, because honestly, I think what's starting to become a problem with tabletop RPGs is everyone is just expecting to make a character that they want to play and just be like, oh, this is my character and they're like this and this is their backstory and whatever. But then they just sit back and let the GM tell them what to do or where they should be going.
Right. They say, can I do this? Can I do that? People don't role play anymore because of just how
people don't push.
The games are made.
Yeah, people don't push for their own objectives. People don't push for their own story to be told. They're just sort of sitting back and letting things ride. So any game that allows you to write up your own objectives and your own goals to give you something to actually work towards over the course of the campaign that the GM can then mix in as he or she feels is appropriate, that's fantastic because it actually encourages you to participate.
Most of the time when I'm asking, can I do this, it's because I'm either going to do something amazing, stupid, or both.
Amazingly stupid.
I prefer the first one.
I mean, I just let GMs tell me. I'm like, oh, well, I'm gonna run off and jump off the cliff and stab the thing in its head, and because of that, I get double damage. And they're like, no, you don't. I'm like, okay, I don't. That's my intent, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, like and the thing with the designs is it also again ties back into the domain where you can actually push forward your goals, like you were saying.
Yeah. Plus, the design helps just ground your character, or help the player with some grounding. Just like, oh yeah, by the way, this is kind of what I intended to do.
Yeah, exactly.
You can list it in alignment, but if you're not, you're not going to pay attention to it, you might as well.
Yeah. So that's step one of making your character, is sort of get the general concept of who you are and what you're doing out of the way. Then it's distributing talents, which talents is interesting because
you get your heroic traits first. I don't know if you.
Oh yeah, you get your heroic traits first. I skipped that part. So everybody has 4 heroic traits: brawn, charisma, intelligence, intellect, and what was the last one? Was it reflexes or agility?
Action.
What? Reaction. That's what it was. So your 4 archetypical things of body, speed, charm, and brain. And these act as sort of a bonus to all rolls made that are under the same category as your heroic trait or are related to your heroic trait. You get 2 points to distribute amongst these, and you can only be 1 in any given one, at least at the start here.
Yeah, you can't stack them.
Can't stack them. You just pick 2 things you want to be good at. Do you want to be a charming warrior? Do you want to be a fast wizard, or whatever? Insert thing here. Then we get into talents. Talents is interesting because it is a composite of your attributes and your skills all into one category.
Technically, with the design, everything was supposed to be a skill.
Right. Though some of them actually feed into secondary traits, and as well as act as more broad skills, which is basically why they're attributes.
Yeah. Yep. So you have the 6. It's like strength, endurance, mind, strength, endurance, mind, will, spirit, and ability.
Yeah. So having it all lumped into one category is interesting to me because it gives an equal validity and weight to everything that you're doing, to all these parts of your character, both the skills and the attributes. And you can only get a limited number of points to spend amongst them, and you have three types, though honestly standard's usually the best way to go because it's the most balanced, unless you really want to be a specialist or you really want to be a jack of all trades.
Yeah, it's narrow, standard, and broad. So the reason we have those is that I was trying to design, when I was designing how characters were built, rogue character couldn't be made unless you made the fighter have too many things, right? So the rogue, or like a jack of all trades kind of character,
right,
couldn't get enough. If I gave him enough, then the fighter could get too much, right? So the character that really just wants to specialize. So people can choose, and the narrows are good for your pure wizards, your pure fighters, like anybody who's going to really focus in one area. You get fewer points overall. I think it's like 3 points, or that's 3 points fewer overall, I think, or something like that. But you can increase your scores a little higher.
Right, exactly. So once you've got your points distributed, and the interesting thing is you also don't have to distribute points into all your attributes. It's not recommended, but you can.
You can keep your attributes at 0 if you want. Some people do. A lot of people they'll put their influence at 0, or they'll put their mind at 0. Sometimes wizards, I've seen wizards put their strength or even endurance at 0.
Oh boy, that's a dangerous gambit.
In revised editions. But, if you got your party protecting you and
All right, and then the next step is to choose a race, and I'm going to actually flip to that page because I really like the race options in this game. It's fascinating to me because you've got the classics, but the ones that you have, the classics for, have interesting tweaks made to them, and then you've got a bunch of refreshing new races as well, which makes for a very fun selection of races that you can play.
Your own race section too.
And then you can also build your own race, which is, if you're feeling daring, a thing. So of the races that you've got available in this book, you've got the Asuri Tall, who are nomadic trolls, or as I like to call them, sexy gypsy trolls. You got
See what they
you got the Seth, who are river people. They look kind of like Zoras from Legend of Zelda. You got Gun Insi.
Luckfish.
What fish?
Like luckfish.
Yeah, luckfish. You got Gun Insi, which are four-eyed goblins. Hammer Dur, which are elemental rock dwarves. Makari clans, which are robo people. Orcus, which are orcs. It's not really. Silpin Kai, which are magic elves. Strad are plant people. Therios breeds are half beasts, or if you want to be less nice about it, you can call them furries. And then you've got two races of humans to choose from. You got your Ultron, which are like your Imperials and your High Society, and then your Fringe Walkers are your rough redneck types.
Yeah, basically, you could look at them as like city folk and like frontier folk.
Yeah, exactly.
Or Aborigines, like indigenous people, versus people of civilization.
Yeah. So the Asuri, so I'll pull up each of the races just so we can take a look at them and say a few words about them. So the Asuri Tall are interesting because they're trolls, and they get Troll Bloodline, which is a great power that everybody can pick up, but we'll get into powers later.
So one thing I want to say is that basically, so back in like I think it was like second edition D&D, there was a concept called Paragon races, where you could play your class as your race, and it was like the epitome of an elf, right? You could go up to level 20 as the epitome of an elf. Kind of took that concept here. All the races have powers that add in like that are very indicative of what they are, and you can choose to move away from those. You can choose to level those up. So yeah, they all sort of have like concepts that are, more importantly, concepts that back up. They get elements that back up their concepts.
Exactly, I like that a lot. So with the Asuri Tall, you not only get because they're basically a race of trolls of sorts. They get that troll bloodline, which gives them some regeneration at rank 1. You can level up as you go, and then they also get Allure, which gives them a bonus, a +1 straight up to their charisma heroic trait, which is just great.
It's really powerful. I think it only works on members who are sexually interested.
I mean, look at that picture. How could you not be? And then we got the Seth, which are cool fish people. They've got some interesting things of that. They get a little brass decanter that contains water to, keep them moist and around and wet.
So if they're just living in their villages and they start getting a little dried out or whatever, they just hop in the water. But if they're out adventuring, basically have a harness that has it's like water against their body and helps keep them hydrated.
Exactly, to keep them nice and wet, because they're fish. We got the tail, which lets them swim a lot faster than most people, and also acts as a third leg for critical hit tables. You got Waterborne, which gives them the swim like a fish power at rank 4. And allows them to hold their breath for quite a long time. And then Ink, which lets them just shoot ink at people like a squid.
Yeah.
Which is fun. You got the Gun Insi, which are these little 4-eyed goblins. They make very good rogues. They're very agile. They get a bonus to their reaction heroic trait, and they've got 4 eyes, which means that they need to be hit twice by blinding effects before they're blinded, which is kind of great.
Kind of made to be little tough buggers.
Yeah.
Not like dwarf tough, but just like hard to manage.
Exactly. Speaking of dwarves, we're getting the Hammer Dur are rock dwarves, which I kind of like this take on dwarves, because most people do the they know about rocks, they know about stones, and they can intuit that stuff, and they're always tough and hardy and whatever. But this is the furthest I've seen taken to, no, they are literally part rock, and you can actually upgrade that to the point where they're just made of rocks.
Yeah, they're elemental. They have the elemental earth bloodline.
They get the elemental earth bloodline, exactly.
Which allows them, if they spend mana, they can actually. I think for every point of mana they spend, they can increase their toughness by 1.
Yeah.
So,
and then on top of that, they get. Oh,
it's
what?
their national anthem, "We Will Rock You."
Oh, don't. They also get this one ability called Stout, which means that the price cap for increasing their endurance is locked at 5. Normally, it would be ever increasing as you go up, but they can just at some point they just pop 5 and they just get their point every time, which means they can take their endurance to ridiculously high levels and just be like unstoppable tanks.
Yeah. So the pointing up, which we'll get to, is always plus 2 points. You get 10 points every level, so it's plus 2 points of what it is. So if it's a 4, to go to a 5 costs 7 points, which is pretty significant. But in their case, they only pay 5.
Right. Then the Makari clans are these cool robo people. They are, for the most part, they're pretty straightforward. They get the clockwork bloodline, which is fun. They can heal themselves, which is interesting, and they can breathe smoke. And then they get a Makari clan, which is sort of like a built-in faction for them.
They're all sort of like of the people.
Yeah. Orcs are orcs. They're pretty straightforward. The interesting thing about them is that they always come from a clan, so they also have a built-in faction, and they can reduce the minimum strength for using a weapon by -1, which honestly is interesting because it's like you would imagine that if you're going to be using a big weapon like that, you would want more and more strength. So at some point, I don't know. I guess that one seems to me like it just sort of becomes not so useful after a certain point.
It allows you to dual wield easier because when you dual wield, the second weapon requires. So let's say you're using a sword that has a minimum strength of 3. If you want to use that sword again, the minimum strength then is 5. So they can by having that, it allows them to dual wield like 2 really big swords.
Oh, okay. Now that makes a lot more sense now.
Yeah.
So you can start like dual wielding like giant swords or like axes or something.
You can also make weapons that are so big, like it might require 7 strength.
Right.
And maybe it's a little off. Because we're gonna come out with
an errata.
Yeah, I was gonna republish this book. It's POD. I was just gonna go around and fix a few things.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. That could work.
Little minor fixes like that one.
Yeah.
To talk about the clans is I think there are like 7 clans in the book, but 2 of them are more like friendly, to outsiders, and so you basically choose one of the 2. Are you going to be the Jungle Clan or the Tundra Clan? So I believe that.
I think if I remember the lore correctly, they're more willing to work with outsiders simply because it's like, okay, you could either try to fight them or you could profit. Do you want the profit? Just take the profit.
Another thing about orcs is that they all get a bonus to save against anything magical.
Oh yeah, that's really good, especially in a so heavily magic world. Let's see. Then speaking of magic, we got the Silpen Kai, which another nice take, I think, on elves. They kind of remind me a little bit of like this sound bad, but like night elves from World of Warcraft, where they're all inherently like just infused with tons of magic. So these are like honestly I think one of the best races almost for any build, simply because they get a free spell school.
Well, if you want
magic.
if you're gonna play a caster, and they also get +5 mana, which allows them to cast basically 1 level 5 spell, or they can cast 5 level 1 spells for free.
Mm-hmm.
Also get they don't get quite as much, but they get a little deeper, right? So they get the night vision. The whole concept behind the elves is that they are more talented with mana. So a higher percentage of them are able to use mana in a more potent way than, let's say, your average human. Average human might be able to use 1 or 2 mana a day, maybe like the village healer, right? The village sage, the most talented mana user might be able to use like 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 mana a day at most, where just elves can just can just do it.
Yeah, exactly. On top of that, just like again, like especially if you want to be a wizard, like I don't see any reason not to be an elf just because you can have the most starting schools of anybody.
Yeah, you can start with 5 schools as opposed to 4, but you might want other things, like
This is true.
One of the issues back in 2nd edition was that the best race for magic users was the dwarves, because elves did not inherently get anything in their magic, and so I wanted to give them something
to really set them apart as magic users. Yeah, and then next we have the Strad, who I really like because everyone, like, I feel like every time I run a game, everyone just sleeps on the Strad, but holy crap, they are so good right out the gate. Because for one, they get 4 arms, which means that they can either quad wield or dual wield two-handed weapons, which is really good.
Or two-handed ranged weapons, or one shield, 1 great weapon, and like 2 regular weapons, like 2 pistol crossbows, a shield, and like a blade. Wait, no, that's too much.
You can do all sorts of you can all do all you can do all sorts of nutty stuff. But the real big thing is you get nimble, which means you get a free extra action right out the gate. That's in a game like this. That is insane.
You can buy it. It's just 4 points.
I mean, you can buy it, sure, but being able to start with it is so strong.
Nimble. Does it do? It also does something else. Oh no, you just get the heroic action. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then you also get plants, which because they're plant people, so they get the plants bloodline.
Yeah, they get Strider too, which means that so in this game, I think actually 5th edition went to this. 5th edition went to a lot of things that I already had written. One of the things is difficult terrain basically just slows down your movement, so they can ignore X number of feet of difficult terrain.
Right.
Move through this like dense brush, you lose like 15 feet of movement per turn. They can just ignore. They can ignore so much of that. I think they ignore 15 feet.
Yeah, that's a lot. All right, and then the Therios are your beast people. They look kind of like this. They get some. You can either get claws or tail. I like the claws. Like, I'm realizing that these guys are probably like, if you want to build a monk type of character, these guys are some of the best ones because they get the Spirit Blow power right away. And Spirit Blow is pretty much essential for any monk build. And monks can be really, really strong in this game.
If you want to think about the classic monk, if you want to be like the no weapon wielding monk,
the punch monk.
You can also get Iron Fist, which allows you to parry weapons. So like you can take that and you can parry ranged weapons with like your sword. So you can be a little more like the Wuja monk or like the Wuja fighter with it too.
Yeah, I've discovered in my tinkering around with some builds that monks can be really, really strong if you build them right, because they can get in there to close quarters combat, which has its own little rules that makes them really strong, especially since they can dual wield for free because it's fists.
Yeah, and they actually
you have to get a bunch of different powers in order to make them effective.
I mean, you do, but once you do, oh boy, they scale up very quickly.
Yeah.
And then you also get the animal bloodline, which is great. And then back to the beast feature though, the tail is also really good because if you want to use acrobat, the acrobat power, which we'll get into later, having a tail just on a prehensile tail on hand allows you to use that power with a lot of ease and not have to worry about what you're carrying on you.
Yeah, you can also carry an extra weapon with it. You can do a lot of stuff with it.
Yeah, there's all sorts of fun stuff. And then last but not least are the humans. The humans are pretty straightforward. They get extra points for rounding them out, extra XP for rounding them out, and they get a lower cost to raise certain talents depending on what type of human they are. So for the city humans, they have a reduced cost for influence, insight, and guile, and then for the fringe humans, they have a reduced cost for awareness, athletics, and spirit. Okay.
Oh, Romans and Gaul.
Romans and Gauls. There we go. So let's get back. So let's.
So not suing.
Yeah. So let's get back. Let's get back to the character creation. Now we've gone to the races because I love the races. So the next step is selecting professions or languages. So this is a little interesting because professions act almost sort of like prereqs to being able to make rolls as opposed to skills themselves. They sort of just say, okay, you know how to do this.
So the reason we went with professions, originally they were like knowledge skills, and it's so hard to write down like 10 or 15 or 100 knowledge skills and have them like, because it's like, well, I want to be a blacksmith. What do you have to know to be, how many knowledges do you have to be a blacksmith? So what we did instead was just change it to professions, because now if you take the blacksmith profession, you know everything a blacksmith knows just because you chose. Now, if you enact the professions using one of your talents, so it might be intellect, it might be strength, it might be like, well, I'm gonna make this like huge axe head. It doesn't really take a lot of knowledge, but I gotta beat on it for like 3 hours. Maybe I gotta make an endurance roll, right? So you enact, and when we get to the actual, this is any talent you have is an approach. So however you can rationalize it within the fictional positioning, that's how it operates.
Exactly, and I kind of like that because it simplifies it down. Like at first, I wasn't like that into it. I'm not gonna lie, but as I played the game more, I'm like, oh no, this makes things so much easier.
You're not needling like, well, you have to like have leather working and metal working and woodworking and all this stuff, and then make 4 rolls to try to craft something or to have some sort of knowledge. Yeah, if you basically have a level of knowledge.
Yeah, exactly.
Expertise in those areas, yeah.
Or just like, and especially with the crafting system, which we'll get into later, it's just being able to say, okay, I've got the professions for this, I know how to do it, let's roll. Or I don't have the professions for this, okay, I can't do that one. Which makes it very straightforward and easy. All right, then there's Dominion, actions, and toughness.
With the languages, we cut the languages down to, I forget exactly how many languages there are. I think there are.
There's still quite a few.
Oh yeah, it's 13 languages. But they're like, Cavern speak is what people speak underground. Demon tongue is what like the demons speak. Eastern speak is what people from the Hokate speak. Western speak is what anyone from Incio speak. So actually taking languages is powerful because there isn't like 100 different languages, and you pick a language and go, when am I ever going to use that? We just use common or whatever.
Right.
So, yeah, languages, and some people you can actually trade in the ability to take professions for more languages. And we have people that choose to do that.
Right. So yeah, having languages is good. Let's get into the next step, which is assign Dominion actions toughness. That's pretty simple. Dominion is, like you said earlier, you can use it to drive the story forward, or you can use it for rerolls, or you can use it for all manner of little things to just give you a boost. You've got actions, which you start with 3, but we'll get into how that works later, because it's not as many as you think. And and toughness. Everybody starts with 5, except Gun, Inci, and who get a 6, and Makari who get a 7. That kind of acts like your natural armor.
Natural armor in like other systems.
Yeah. And then we get into step 6, which is my favorite step, because it's when you get to buy powers. So the way that Age Pass works is there is no classes. It's entirely a classless fantasy RPG, but it's not entirely just skill-based, which I actually really enjoy. Because the thing about class-based RPGs is everyone seems to rely on the classes to be a method of conveying, special abilities, to your character, those class abilities that everyone so covets deeply. But Age Pass, what I love about it is it said, well, what if we just took all those class abilities from all those classes and we got rid of the classes, and we just put all class abilities in a big list that you can point by from to custom tailor your character to be exactly what you want them to be. And that's what it is. It's great. It's so customizable down to a T, and you can have the exact sort of fantasy hero that you want to play that, you know, in another game would either be suboptimal because it would be so complex to make, or would require you to do a whole bunch of multi-classing nonsense and search through like 5 books to find the right thing just to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, so there are around 140 powers, and each power can be usually they can be taken 3 or 4 times. Some are only 1 or 2, but for the most part, you can be taken 3 or 4 times. So if you take 140 powers and you take the number of times you can take them, you're talking about millions and millions of different types. It's very common for 3 different fighter type characters in the game not have any of the same powers. Literally none. They won't share a single power. Well, they might share the basic powers like extra attacks, but like other than that,
Yeah. Dan, you want to handle talking about powers? You've been pretty quiet for most of this.
I don't know that much about the lore of the system, so not too much for me to talk about there.
Yeah. But you know about powers and you know about builds.
Yeah, I've read through a lot of these several times. So with the powers, you get build points based. It varies a little bit depending on what race and other stuff. Some you get a little more, some you don't, and some you get extra powers, as was already discussed. But you go through, you basically design your character from the ground up, like said. It's greatly recommended on all class systems to have an idea what you're going for. So, like if you want to build a mage, obviously you won't go around buying a bunch of physical powers. So, I'm apparently out of it today.
It's okay.
But all you do is you go, it tells you what levels you can buy your powers at, how much they cost, and what it does. It's very simple, and if there's anything extra related to the powers, it tells you what, where, and how to deal with it.
And you can also upgrade.
For example, the Acolyte power. You can you buy it to worship a deity. It's very useful if you use blood magic, for example, because when you use blood magic without being an Acolyte of Blood, you have a chance of hurting yourself. If you are an Acolyte of Blood, you no longer have that chance. But the price, you lose 1 mana.
Acolyte specifically means that you worship a god, and that god recognizes you. They specifically give you something based on that god's, essence.
Yes.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's good for if you want to be like a cleric archetype or like a paladin of some sort, because you're basically one of the gods favored or chosen.
And forsake the god and lose the power forever.
Which is, why would you do that? A terrible idea.
Heart.
Yeah. So under Acolyte, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 options so you can choose from.
So yeah, some of these powers go deep on top of, yeah.
For example, you can choose Acolyte of Battle. So those who relish in it and worship battle can be recognized. While outnumbered in battle, so if you're outnumbered, the character gains a minor bonus to save against all hostile spell effects. To get a minor bonus to speed and to strength.
Yeah.
But only well outnumbered.
Only when outnumbered.
Which, I mean, let's face it, in most parties is all the time.
You're either fighting like a ton of orcs or you're fighting like one big orc.
Yeah.
I was gonna say my GM for my current game likes to throw one big enemy at us.
You usually got about 50-50 chance either way.
Yeah, so one of the things about the powers is they're triple balanced. So they're balanced through their actual ability, what's written, balanced through the build point cost that you take them at. And so whether it's 3, usually they go from 3 to 7, most of them are 4, 5, or 6. And also balanced by the level you can take it at. So they're all very, very balanced. So you can buy a whole bunch of little things for 3 points each and have a ton of powers. Or you can buy just a few more expensive powers at like 5, 6, and 7 points. You know the utility you're going to have, right? These are choices that you make based on the expectations you have for the game, and your expectations for the GM are pretty solid. And you're going to have fun with what you do because you know what you're doing. That's your, you know,
That's your toolkit.
Yes, you're not stuck with anything you don't want. You never have anything you don't want. You always have exactly what you want.
Exactly. You know, you have all the stuff. You have absolute control over exactly how your character comes out. And that's something I love because it's not like a predetermined path that your class that you chose gives you. It's no, I want, like, even if down the road you're like, oh, that's a pretty cool power. I'm going to pick that up because that might be useful with how things have been going lately. You can totally do that. You're not even just stuck to the ones that you picked at the beginning, which is great. And like all of these are upgradable, and some, if you don't want to upgrade them, that's okay. You can spend it on, you can spend your XP on like improving your skill, your talents, or you can spend it on improving or buying new powers or other things like that. So you can have tailored down to the wire exactly the character you want to be playing.
They're designed to have diminishing returns, so you generally don't want to take the same power 4 times. You won't get a lot of utility out of it. It depends, but if you want to specialize, be a heavy specializer, usually what people do is by the time they hit max level, standard max level, which is 15th level, you're going to have about 2 powers that are maxed out to level 4. Then they're going to have a couple powers that are at level 3, and they might have like 3 of those. And then you're going to have a whole bunch of powers that are just at level 1 and 2. And they'll probably end up with about a total of about 12 powers, give or take. So, you know, it's hard to say exactly, but you can see that it forms a pyramid as opposed to into like 4 or 5 things, because it's designed not to work super well that way.
A pyramid of power, you might
if
say.
you only have a handful of powers, you're gonna end up very limited other than specific situations.
Yeah. Now, granted, some of these powers are like absolutely well worth, you know, going deep on. Like, for example, my favorite example is Apprentice Spellcaster, which, if you want to play a wizard, go deep on that thing because, yeah, you get a lot. You can have every bit you put into every extra 3 points you put into buying that power, especially at character creation, is more like a whole new school of magic that you get access to. We'll talk more about magic at later down the episode, but because I want to get into that, I love the magic system. But yeah, that's like something that you might want to go deep on. Now, whereas others, you know, don't necessarily need to, like we said.
Another one that, depending on your playstyle, you really might want to go deep on, like if you are, like you like to use knives, or you're the monk that we were talking about earlier, close quarters style. CQC is amazing, and this makes it even better.
Yeah, and it's just like it actually, like, I love the close quarter style for the monk because it's like it absolutely is great to just go all the way to rank 4 with that, because if you're gonna be playing with punches, you want to be playing with that close quarter style, because not only do you get a nice bonus from being in close quarters inherently, but you can get all these bonuses on top of that and just go to town on people.
Yeah, there are tons of different ways you can build a character with this. Sorry about that. I've built a monk mage hybrid and a beastmaster spellcaster, and I mean, they weren't high level, so I didn't get too deep into it. Didn't get the high level stuff, but I had plans for it. And I mean, even then, I only planned out a couple of the purchases that I planned to take for end game, building for end game, and I would still have had a lot of points left over.
Oh yeah. So, and let's talk about some of these. You got some great ones like some classics like armor expertise, which allows you to use heavier and heavier armor with less penalties. You got your backstabbing strike, which is a classic for rogues of just stabbing someone in the back as a surprise or sneak attack. But then you have things like Baffle Gab, which I love for all bards because you can just launch a confusing verbal assault on all who can understand you. It does. It hits two at least right out the gate. It targets 2 characters in a 25-foot cone to take just a massive penalty from pain, and you can just keep increasing the number of targets that you can hit with this.
Physically hurt them by being confusing.
By just yelling, yelling at them.
Baffle Gab's a real word, by the way.
Yeah, I love it. You've also got the Bloodline Power, which is great because that adds sort of like a lot of the races have a bloodline, but the Bloodline Power allows you to just be like further customize your race to be exactly what you want. Well,
so you start becoming a monster, and the more you take it, Bloodline actually it's a little deeper because once you get to if you rank it all the way up to 4th level, you end up taking a weakness.
And then if you hit
Some
rank
aren't
5,
too bad, but some can be pretty nasty.
And then if you hit rank 5 with it, then you get a guaranteed weakness that you don't get to choose, which is usually really nasty.
So rank rank 5, which is optional technically, or if you go above rank 15.
We can take a look at that in a second, but I still want to show some of these like Boom Master, because who doesn't want to use a shotgun? And then now you can make your shotgun awesome.
You had player use that. Or was it the other one?
Say what?
I know there's a couple shotgun boosters.
That's the main shotgun booster. It gives you a bunch of different options for your that you can
Boom
use
Master,
with your.
I remember use the copper coin one all the time.
Yeah, the copper coin one is great. You can use the sawed off barrel. You can have a grappling hook on it instead of slugs. You can have a tight barrel, etc. There's Break Beast if you want to be someone who works with animals. You can get your own ship or airship if you take captain. You can, if you want to be like a bard who uses magic and focus primarily on using your charisma instead of your mind, then you can pick up charismatic energy to change your magic from being like intelligence based magic to being charisma based magic. Close quarter style combat, all that stuff. Let me see if there's any other really interesting ones. Deadeye is great for gunslingers, always very, very useful.
Or archers, yeah.
Or archers too. Archers too is also very good. Elemental Fury is great because if I recall correctly, elemental damage just goes straight through armor, right?
Yeah. So basically, not only that, well, you have elemental attacks do. Elemental damage doesn't. So elemental damage would be like your sword has flame around it.
Right.
Like in Game of Thrones with the Soldiers of Light, they had the flaming swords. But if your sword is actually made of flame, and you cannot parry it, or your armor will not defend against it, and that damage goes straight to your toughness. So Elemental Fury allows you to actually parry other elemental attacks, or turn your attack into an elemental attack. Basically, turn your sword into fire.
Yeah, and it also causes the damage of the elemental type, which is useful.
It also causes damage to the element as well, yeah.
So that's a really good one.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go on.
I was to say, which makes it one of those where, depending on the campaign you're running, almost everyone might have it.
Yeah, I actually had a guy who made a shotgun user who took Elemental Fury, so he could have what he called the Thunder Bus, which was just a lightning, and a lightning infused version of a shotgun, so it just blew apart anybody he shot with because they couldn't really do much to defend against it.
But he has to spend a lot of mana to do it.
Oh yeah, of course, but most things were dead by after the first shot, which was really good. Then there's Empathic Link, which I know Dan adores to death.
Master.
Say that again?
You can make a Beast Master, of course.
You can make a Beastmaster, and the really cool part of it is you can build your animal companion from the ground up. Like,
Yes,
to be
that's
exactly the sort of animal companion you want. And there's a whole subsection on that later on in the book, that in a whole little system for custom building your own pet, which is really, really cool, because they can even have like magical abilities. Like I once made a fire-breathing hellhound.
You can also give them intelligence and have them cast spells. You can go up and
You can even make them fly and be rideable, or all sorts of stuff. We also had
basically the game is made to allow you to do anything you want.
exactly. We had a guy once in a game who built a Titan-sized boar that he rode around on, named Mr. Wilbur.
Oh, Enix. You remember how I was making that Beastmaster?
Yeah.
My bird could cast spells.
Oh my gosh, stop it. Stop. If you want to play that sort of leadership role, you could also get a companion, like that's just like another player character, or you can even get your own little entourage of 0-level companions, who just are like follow you around and help you out with stuff, or fight for you even.
The only major difference is any companion you have will not have heroic traits. So they're going to be they're not considered heroic characters.
Right. But it's still very useful if you always like the idea of leadership in D&D 3.5, but your GM never let you take it. This is a pretty good way of accomplishing that.
All companion based, whether it's like another person or an animal, they're all optional rules, because it is up to the players to be able to have to know the rules to use them.
Exactly. There's also powers for if you want to be like, if you want to focus on using grenades, because there's a whole bunch of grenades that you can play around with. There's a power for that. That lets you do some fun stuff with them. There's
one of the most powerful weapons.
Oh yeah. Then there's like if you want to use throwing weapons, there's a power for that called Guided Hurl. There's Heart Strike for doing better crits. There's Illusionary Guise. There's a whole bunch of illusion powers which are great. So you can be like a really good illusionist trickster, and actually have it be effective, which is really, really great. Including an attack power called Illusionary Strike. There's one called Juxtapose, which I'm very fond of taking, especially for warriors. That lets you just literally swap places with someone. So if your buddy gets in danger, you can just swap places with them and then go to town on whoever they were fighting. On the other hand, you could also take it as someone who's squishy and just be like, "Oh no, I'm in trouble. Better swap places with the warrior." There's also there. Let's see.
Warp Stride, which is really good.
Warp Stride is also very good. It's just a teleport step, always useful. Mana Bolt, if you just want a magic shot attack, but don't want to necessarily invest in a magic school, it's useful.
It's a line effect, so it affects everything in a line, I believe.
Yeah. It's a 25-foot line.
You warp stride over, get them all in a line, and then zap them all.
Yeah, exactly. And if you don't want to invest in a bunch of whole magic school and doing all that, that's a great little just poof that you can do.
That was the original point of the powers, was for you to be able to make a bard or make like a druid without having to take magic spells, right? Because your effects are basically not.
Exactly.
It's recall weapon simply because if say you have a really powerful weapon, you start chucking it at people.
Yeah, exactly. You could make Thor and just be able to throw your hammer at people and then call it back and throw it again.
And there's also Legacy, which is really cool. You have like a little pocket dimension that you can pull items out of. as long as you own the item and it's in that pocket dimension. But basically, the more you take it, the bigger the item you can pull out. So if you have like a cannon, war machine, or it doesn't matter, a magic wand, just hiding hiding your pocket dimension, you can pull it out and use it.
And just go. It's great. It's very, very useful. Another favorite one of mine, especially for bards, because I love playing bards, is Pipes of Blasting, where you can just summon a wind instrument that when you invoke you can invoke a special effect on to just blast sound out of, and not only deafen people but do damage to them. So like if you've always wanted to play your warrior Scotsman with his bagpipes of death, that's totally an option that you can do.
God.
There's also a lot of social powers as well.
Faster.
You can become part of a faction, which is actually very powerful because the faction will give you assistance. Now you have to buy into the faction, or literally buy into it, but you have duties to uphold within that faction.
Yeah. There's also leadership, which allows you to give out bonuses to your party. This one isn't a social one, but I do like it because it allows you, if you want to play a barbarian berserker, there is rage. You've got your rage. It's there, and it's good. It just gives you a massive bonus.
Just turn yourself into a noble.
Yeah, you could be a noble, absolutely, or a captain and have a ship, like I said earlier. And then there's one that I think also a lot of people sleep on that I think is really cool, and that's the Shifter, which is if you want to be something like a werewolf or just any sort of shapeshifter, you can pick up that power and just do it, and just shift into a magical beast of some way, into an animal, and then at rank 4 you can shift into a magical beast of some sort, which is fantastic. And
there's a one that allows you to take animal, that allows you to just oh no, that's in the expansion, I think, right? It lets you change just parts of you into animal.
Yeah, that's in the expansion that's coming, which we should do an episode on when it comes out. And then there's also other cool things like going back to the social stuff. There's Social Pariah, which allows you to drain mana while you're talking to them. I love that. It's a great It's such a cool idea. Say what? Hello? Did someone say something?
I think that might have been.
Yeah, Dan, you're kind of breaking up a little bit.
My mic.
There you go. There you are. Hello. What did you say?
I didn't say anything. I muted my mic.
Oh, okay. Then there's also Spider Walk, which just lets you walk on walls. Always great.
Nice is I know like in 5th edition that exists as a spell, but this it's an ability. You just use it.
You just pop it and you go. Yeah, which I really like because I don't think enough people give credit to that. It's one of my favorite abilities for a rogue to have, is to be able to walk on the walls, and I like that it's there. And in addition, it's also funny because there's at the bottom here there's a power called Zip Spinner. So if you wanted to play Spider-Man, you totally could build Spider-Man with the powers in this, which is really, really fun. Let's see there, and then I guess the last one that I'll talk about because I think it's cool is tattoos, which gives you magical tattoos that can do all sorts of cool stuff. And I love it whenever a game has that because it's so much fun to have cool magical tattoos. But yeah, let's talk about the Bloodlines real quick because that one is a whole another can of worms, which is really fascinating. But yeah, you got a whole bunch. The amount.
Only thing is the fact that you do transform
a bit as with each rank you go up.
Kind of not like some of them.
I'm fine with it because I kind of feel like it really allows you to make a much more customized version of your character and can evolve a bunch of races into something so much more. You can be your bloodlines available are angels, animals, vampires, we call blood drinkers, clockworks, if you want to be robo, demons, dragons, which is a favorite of mine, Elemental Giants, Enchanted, which is kind of like being half dead in a weird way. It's sort of like being between the spirit world and the real world. Would you say?
You're, yeah, the enchanted live in limbo, which is a buffer between heaven and the actual physical world.
Right. And then you got your plants, which the Strad have. Shadow, which is the shadow realm. Like, no other way to describe
That's
it.
where all the duel masters went.
Oh no! They played too many children's card games. And then trolls and undead. So there's so much customization you can do, so much deep you can get into in making your character.
Undead is my favorite because you can attach limbs to yourself.
Oh yeah. You can. I think we had
earlier. If you get to rank 5, you actually get rank 4. You get a weakness, which varies depending on the race, such as troll. You have to choose between troll eyes, awful smell, and disproportioned, or the GM can choose for you.
Yeah.
And then if you go to rank 5, you would get uncontrollable fury.
Right. Which is, and every rank, every bloodline has that. At rank 4, pick one of 3. At rank 5, you're getting this one, and it's bad.
Lance only has a single one at 4.
Oh really?
Yep. You're just soft.
Huh.
Yeah, plants only have one. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. All right. Anyway, so
elemental only has 2.
Oh, weird. But yeah, so let's keep
Some of that to do with spacing in the homes and stuff.
let's keep moving along because this episode's already getting long. So step 7 is calculate wounds and mana. Pretty simple, straightforward. Step 8 is choose morality and torment, and this is another one that I gotta get in on because this is just such a perfect response. It feels like to the alignment, I'm gonna say it, the terrible alignment chart of D&D.
That is a very good way to describe it.
So I'm pulling it up here. This is called the morality. So instead of having an alignment chart, we have the morality wheel. The morality wheel looks something like this. You basically have 3 rings, and you choose an aspect from each ring for your character. You have your core, which is sort of just the absolute center and rock that your morality is built upon at the core of your character, and there's 3 options for that. You can either be heroic, which is very good and very noble and very all that good stuff. You can be malevolent, which is just evil and terrible and awful. Or you can be selfish, which is pretty much neutral. You're looking out for number 1. From there, you pick a, what do they call it? A drive, which is sort of how that core manifests in a way, or how you express it. Well, no, it's how it manifests. It's sort of a refinement of the good, neutral, or evil. So for heroic, you can take devoted, gallant, or generous. And that's sort of how you express your goodness. You could be, for selfish, you could be greedy, observant, or treacherous. And then for malevolent, you could be destructive, manipulative, or tyrannical. And then the third wheel allows you to choose, what is it called again, Jeff?
Demeanor.
The demeanor, which is sort of how all of this manifests. It's how you express your morality. So you can be an analyst, avid, boisterous, brash, callous, egotistical, morose, perfectionist, shy, or stubborn. And all of this, once you've had all 3 and you take them all together, you've got a really good sense of how your character will behave in any given situation, because you know what their morals are, how they go about doing those morals, and how they go about expressing all of this to the world. And it makes for much more fleshed out characters right from the get-go than the just sort of like weird, ambiguous terribleness that is the D&D style alignment chart. And any comments?
You've expressed it pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, even though I wrote this, I did write it to be more clear and understand. I kind of do like the D&D alignment system, but it's not something that is understandable to most people. Like, for example, take chaotic good. People say, well, I'm chaotic good, I can do whatever I want. Like, no, chaotic doesn't mean you can do whatever you want. Chaotic means you don't operate with order. You specifically operate with chaos. And what does that mean? What does it mean to operate with chaos? Well, like to plan, right? So if the paladin's like, well, hey, you know, this is what we're going to do. You're going to storm in here, and at this point, you're going to jump through the window, and you know, a chaotic character is going to be like, no, we don't want to plan. We just want to run in there because we do a plan that's going to fail.
To
Right?
quote
See,
to quote Captain Jack Sparrow, you can rely on me to be unreliable.
yeah, but people don't understand. It's chaotic isn't a negative. It's a positive. It's just a positive. It's a positive towards chaotic, and it basically says all the things you're not going to do. Not
Exactly.
Going to plan. Like, in fact, if you're a chaotic, like a chaotic good ranger, and there's a awful good paladin, you're in the same party, and the paladin starts spouting out plan, the ranger will probably, by alignment, most likely start arguing with them. Like, no.
Or even better, just yell Leroy Jenkins and run in there without caring.
Or do something, you know, without any kind of like real specific.
Chaotic good is essentially you do whatever it takes for the greater good.
Yeah.
Well, so that's what I was just saying. I don't think it is, because the best analogy I had was that if you have dying.
That's actually in one of the books.
Yeah, but see, I don't think the books. I know, right?
I don't think the books are right.
I will argue with the books. Like, I've read, it was like neutral evil, and I like read it. And I'm like, this is not what neutral evil is. But so, like, for example, if there is a dying king and a dying peasant, you can only heal one, or you know, save one. Lawful good character will always save the king, always save the king. The chaotic good person will always save the peasant. Always. The neutral good person will save whatever is better for the greater good. So you start taking examples and applying them like that, I think it becomes much easier to understand the alignment system and like how they operate, like the motivations. Like, chaotic people have a distrust of order. Order people have a distrust of chaos.
Even so, I like the morality wheel a lot better. It's a lot more nuanced. It's a lot more it's a lot more fully realized, we'll go with. And there's a lot less ambiguity on what you're about than the alignment chart. This section also has the torments, which I kind of like, which is, you know, a flaw that you have to deal with. So it's not just all sunshine and roses all the time. You could have something that's like biting at your heels the whole time you're adventuring, which I kind of like. It makes it much more interesting. It makes a character much more than just like a Mary Sue.
I love some of those flaws. Like, a god wants to kill you.
God wants you dead, or is really, really pissed off and is going to make your life a living hell, which I love.
Like the doppelganger one, where like you go into town and people are like, "There's that jerk."
They're like, "Who? What?" Which can always lead to a showdown with your doppelganger, which is such a fun concept. I love it.
And it's also good because even if you don't play with them every single game session, it allows the GM to like, wait, what was your torment, and pull it out occasionally just to like, you know,
just to mess with you.
Mess with people, give the party additional challenge.
Yeah, I like that. Okay, so moving along, just to keep things moving, because, again, we're running a little long here. Step 9 is calculate gear points and equip the character, which, again, so much cleverness here in this system of just making things easier, because if there's one thing that everyone, and I mean everyone, hates in RPGs, it's the start of the game shopping, because it is so tedious, takes so long, and you're just trying to get through your money being like, okay, can I afford this? Okay, what do I need? But this system says, you know what? Your money is for special stuff, which is going to go pretty fast anyway. So anything that is 100 gold or less, and here on your character sheet is a whole list of general equipment, all marked if it's actually 100 gold or less. You just can take it whatever you want that's 100 gold or less for free. So here's this little checklist of general equipment. Just check off what you're taking. If it's like not specifically marked, it's
points
as long as you have the gear points, which is another thing I'll get to in a second. But if it's not marked for being over 100 gold, just check it off. You got that. You're good. And also, most weapons and some armors, some good starting armors, are also 100 gold or less. So you can fully equip very easily, and have your weapon, your armor, and a bunch of general gear, and not have to calculate how much money you've got a single time. The gold that you get for spending on starting equipment is for special things like potions or scrolls or very expensive weapons or armor or gear. So that way, you're saying, I'm investing in this because this is really good and I want it.
Gear management systems are people want. Like, when you make a first level character, you go through and you do spend the time to get the gear because it helps you feel like that's what your character has for adventuring, right? It's important.
Yeah.
By the time you're like 7th or 8th level, you've played for a few weeks or a few months or a year, you don't care. You just have a bunch of crap written down on the sheet. And it becomes like, it's transformative, right? So you start with this like thing that you care about so much, and then by the end you just don't care. And the reason you don't care is because it's a pain in the butt to deal with, and no one's tracking the weights and convergences and how much you can hold. And anyone who's done camping or been in the military and done rucksack stuff knows that you can't carry like 4 swords on you. It's really hard to carry 4 swords. So that's why you came up with the gear system.
What kind of camping are you doing?
Like, if you're gonna, yeah, right. If you're gonna analogize, like, what would 4 swords be in a camping context, right? But like, but yeah. So I mean, if the gear system says, okay, well, you can have a total of 4 one-handed weapons. Each one takes up 2 gear points. If you have 35 gear points, I have 8 gear points less. And guess what? You just check it off, and the GM could be like, well, you drop your gear, you know exactly what you're dropping. Like, if your pack rips open, you know exactly what the GM could be like, okay, your pack rips open and 8 gear points worth of stuff falls out. Erase that off your sheet.
Yeah, the gear points is like my favorite solution to carry weights of all time, because let's face it, in every other like D&D or high fantasy system that has a carry weight system, everyone ignores it because it's a pain in the ass to try to keep track of. The gear points allows you to be like, okay, here's a streamlined version without big numbers, and most everything already has its weight in gear points written on the character sheet, which is immensely helpful. Because it makes it so there is so much less bookkeeping. You just know exactly what things are and how much they weigh.
Yeah, it definitely made buying everything, once I figured out where everything was in the book and what they all had, what I wanted, it made getting what I wanted much faster,
which everybody loves. So the last step of character creation is enhancing your character. You basically round out the character with some extra XP. You can use it to buy powers, increase talents, learn new professions, learn new languages, raise spell levels, buy wounds, buy mana, buy speed, buy a racial weapon or shield bonus, which is a whole weird thing. Not particularly big fan of, not gonna lie.
I took it out for the other editions.
Yeah. And then buy a point of dominion or buy a comrade, which is step 11. Comrades are kind of cool, where you get everybody starts with 1, and they act as NPCs that your character knows and are buddies with, and every comrade has ranks of loyalty, or what was it?
It's like power, loyalty, and
power, access, and bond.
That's right. How easy it is for you to find them.
So the power is how powerful is this person in terms of social or monetary or whatever power. Access is how easy is it for you to get in touch with them and get an audience with them, for them to help you out. And bond is how loyal are they to you. So really cool, and allows you to actually sort of be tied into the world, we'll say, by having this NPC that you already know and are already associated with in some way, shape, or form. All right, now that we've gone past the lengthy bit about character creation, where we talked about a lot of stuff, let's talk about the game mechanics themselves, including just rolls and combat. So, Jeff, why don't you take it away?
Okay, well, rolling is based on the dice pool. So if your if your skill or whatever you're rolling tells you you're rolling 5, you roll 5 dice. And when you roll, you take the highest. So if you roll 5, and all the dice are die 10s. You never need any multiple die 10s. Let's say your pool is 5, which is really handy, and I'll explain that in a second. But your pool is 5, so you spend you roll your 5 dice, and let's say your highest roll is an 8, so that's your score. You get an 8. But you can choose to hold dice back, and for every die that you hold, you choose not to roll, you will get +1 bonus on the highest die. So let's say, once again, I have a pool of 5. I choose to roll 3 of the dice. I hold 2 and do not roll them. The highest number I get then gets +2. So if I roll 3 dice and get an 8, because I held the 2 dice, my score is now a 10. Also, just to add some luck factor, every additional 10 after the first 10 do a +2 to your roll. If you roll, for example, 3 dice and they all come up 10s, then your total score is a 14. Which is really cool because this creates a really nice bell curve in the rolling system. And the reason that it's so important is because if you double the value that you're looking for in a roll, you get a critical success, and if you roll half or less, you get a critical failure, a fumble, basically. So if you're looking for an 8, you roll a 4 or less, you get a fumble. Well, if you only roll 1 die, you're adding 4 to it. Let's say, once again, we have our pool of 5. So I'm only rolling 1 die. If I roll a 10, I get a 14. I have a 10% chance of getting a 14, right? I got a 20% chance of at least getting a 13. But I also have a 10% chance of getting a 5, or 20% chance of getting no better than a 2. So that's really risky. So it allows the player to choose a level of risk that they take when making a roll. This also plays out that once you have your pool, if you take a penalty, there's only 3 levels of penalty in the game: minor, major, and epic. Minor is -1, major is -3, and or minus plus 1, +1 -1, +3 -3, and epic is +6 -6. So if you take a major penalty to your roll, you remove 3 dice from the pool, which means instead of rolling 5, you're only rolling 2. This allows for in-game and fictional positioning to sort of come together, where, let's say, I shield bash somebody and knock them on their butt. Now that they're on their back, they're going to take a major penalty to defend themselves. They're going to take a -3 to defend themselves. So let's say they have 4 dice to parry with, and you now have taken 3 of those dice away. You now have a very good shot of getting a critical hit against them, right? Because they have a much greater shot of rolling low. So you can play with the game. The game has a lot of game space where you can choose to work with certain powers and abilities to form these chains that give you advantages. And it's just not for the character, but for the whole team, right? I might shield bash somebody, and then my teammate comes over and hits him while he's down. So the dice rolling is super adaptive and allows players to the ability to sort of choose how they roll. Also is more indicative of, because it creates a bell curve, if you're generally good at something, you stay good at it because you just take the highest dice out of the roll. So if you're rolling 5 dice and roll all of them, you have a really good chance of rolling like an 8. And 8's a pretty standard number. It's sort of like the range that you need.
Right.
You can always just take the other 4 as each one is a plus, and always roll decent no matter what.
Well, you're always going to get, yeah, but it depends. So occasionally a monster will roll like 6 dice, it hold 2 of them, roll 4, and get 2 10s. So you're going to have, or 3, get 3 10s. So you're at a 14, you're at a 16, right?
Yeah, you might have to take a risk then.
Yeah, if a monster is at a 16, at that point, your job, you're going to get hit, right? Your chance of rolling above that or equaling that is pretty low. So you're going to get hit. So your job at that moment is to at least roll a 9 so you don't get a critical hit. Okay? And so then you choose how you change your dice, because critical hits are very, very nasty in this game. They can take off arms, take off heads, just instantly kill somebody. They can cause somebody to lose their voice, and if you're a spellcaster, you can't cast without losing. If you lose your voice, you can't cast. You can just start slowly, not even slowly, you can bleed out very quickly. So I mean, it's a lot of fictional positioning that goes into and incorporates with the dice rolling.
Yeah.
Integrative design.
Yeah. So core rolling mechanic, not really that complex, but it gives you a lot of agency, I'll say. And I love the risk reward aspect of it. So let's get into combat real quick, because again, we're at like an hour and a half on this already, and we still got more to cover. It's a big system. A lot of stuff here, but I appreciate it because it's like so much thought and so much effort went into it that it's you've got everything you need in the core book, and I mean everything. It's amazing, very completely wild. It's a 400-page tome of goodness. Let's see. So combat is pretty simple. You roll initiative as usual. You roll to attack using a combination of your combat and one of your heroic traits, which can vary. And I do like that all your combat stuff is just relegated to that stat. It's always just your combat. So it's not like you're having to spread yourself thin over a bunch of things if you want to use multiple things, or if you pick up a weapon you don't know how to use, you're totally screwed. It's just your combat. Straight up. Very from there you roll to attack. And rolling to attack is interesting because of the way actions work is you can do a strong attack or you can do a swift attack. And when you do a strong attack, you get to use your full strength for piercing through armor, which we'll get to in a second. A swift attack only uses half your strength, but when you use a strong attack, it uses one action, and then the second time you use it uses 2 actions, and then the third time you use it uses 3 actions, and so on and so forth. Meaning that it gets more and more expensive, and you can only do so many strong actions before you're completely out of actions. So, however, using a swift action always only takes 1 action, but you can only do 1. And once you do it, you're done. Your turn's over in terms of attacking.
Yeah, you can't attack anymore.
Yeah. So, since most characters start with 3 actions, usually what you're going to want to do is you do a strong attack followed by a swift attack, because if you don't have any actions left over, you can't defend yourself.
You can't dodge. You can still parry.
Oh, you can still parry. Okay, that's it. I did not know that. All right.
But you can't move, so if someone comes from behind you, you can't turn and play.
Exactly.
Basically, you have your actions. Everything is an action, whether it's 1, 2, or 3 actions. It's very easy. There's no special form of actions. Basically, this thing is going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take a medium amount of time, or take a lot of time. And so it's very easy for the GM to adjudicate, right? I want to open this door, or I want to pick this lock, or whatever. The GM could be like, okay, well, that's going to take you 3 actions over this course of time. But you roll to attack as normal, like you do, like I explained earlier. But you also have to defend yourself, right? So it's an active defense system,
which I do always like. I always like having an active defense.
If you cannot, for whatever reason, defend yourself, you're considered to have a score of 0 for combat purposes, and that means even an attack of 1 causes a critical hit on you.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is bad. So you always want to be able to at least defend yourself.
So that means sneak attacks are actually very good in this game, right? The risk reward for sneak attacks is very high, unlike other systems where you just do a little bit of damage or extra damage. In this case,
you can get free crit.
Yeah, you get a free crit, right? And the standard rules for free crit is like an extra 2 damage. So a sword does 3 damage, so an extra 2 damage would be, you know, a 66% increase, which is pretty significant. But if you're using not the standard crit rules, you can, you know, do all that special stuff I described earlier. If you're using a slashing weapon, you can like lop off an arm maybe, or stab somebody in the kidney or something.
Exactly.
But so there's 2 ways to defend yourself. You can either dodge, which works off agility, or you can parry, which works off your combat. And you have to choose one or the other. You can't do a combination. Basically, if you're flat-footed, if you've used all your actions, you are unable to move, which means you're unable to dodge, and you're unable to take reaction saves against spells, agility saves against spells. Saves. Right. So now you can still parry if you're out of actions. If you have a big shield and you're holding a shield wall, maybe spending all your actions is okay, but you're not going to be able to save against a agility-based spell, and you're not going to be able to turn in place. So if someone comes behind you, you're just taking it.
Right. So yeah, so there's it. Your positioning and your facing actually matter a lot, and I appreciate that, because a lot of times, you know, it's just like people don't consider the effects of ganging up on someone. The fact that you can gang up on someone and get a benefit out of that is great, and does affects combat a lot for that reason. I think there's also a thing to dodging where it's like, if you keep getting attacked in the same turn, then you start taking more and more penalties for each subsequent attack that you're trying to dodge.
More adjacent enemies.
It's if you're surrounded by multiple enemies, for every enemy after the first, you start taking penalties. Yeah, because it's just harder to get to.
There's not much room to dodge out of the way. You're just gonna roll into someone.
There are powers to negate that. I think
acrobatic roll and surprise move.
Is that? You can also take actions reflexively, which would be sort of like an attack of opportunity. You have to, unless it's egregious or the GM allows you, you have to save that action during your turn. So you have to basically bank an action to act reflexively. Now, it doesn't cost you to lose anything. You just have to do it. Reflexive attacks are always done as swift attack.
Right.
There may be times where it's egregious and the GM lets you use a strong attack or whatever. If a guy is charging all the way across the battlefield at you, you get plenty of time to shoot him or whatever.
Right. And then, so from there, you have the interesting thing of how armor works, because it doesn't work like any other game I've really encountered, really, because it's like, most games will say, okay, it either creates an AC, which is how hard you are to hit when you're wearing armor, or it's just straight damage reduction. Or Deadlands, which is really weird, but we won't get into that. But for Age Past, you then after you have hit the person, you then need to see if you can penetrate through their armor to do damage, which is a strength roll versus their armor as a difficulty. So basically, if any of your dice rolls above the value of the armor, then you have penetrated, and you just straight deal your weapon's damage. Now,
more if you roll extra 10s.
What?
If you roll extra 10s on your strength.
Yeah, you can do some extra damage sometimes. Yeah, but that's the other thing is you can hold dice for this and get bonuses to hope that you get that penetration more, for that penetration to be more likely.
Because the way the dice work is, it starts to get really hard to roll above a 10. So, for example, if you're fighting somebody with armor value of 12, you have to hold dice to penetrate. Otherwise, you're banking on getting multiple 10s within a roll, which doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
So, if you don't have a lot of strength, it can be really, really hard to get through some armor. Versus, though, not having a lot of strength, it's pretty easy to get through light armor. Yeah, it scales up really quickly. Right. Yeah, basically, it's just like most systems. It's 2 rolls. You roll to hit, then you roll to see if you damage. But instead of immediately just damaging, you actually see if you get through the armor. Through the armor, then you cause the damage.
And then because of this, you don't actually roll damage. You just have a flat damage dealt by weapons.
Just have a flat damage.
Which, like,
Which is
honestly,
damage.
I found it really weird at first, but as I play it actually works really nicely.
We it was playtested. I mean, this game was playtested really significantly. I ran like high level like games. I mean, I ran like deep sessions for multiple groups, and everything fleshed out pretty well. Combat, is a little weird for people because they expect to just do the damage, but the thing about the system is there aren't ways to get a lot of extra damage, right? So there aren't powers that are like they're very similar to like Weapon Master, where if you're using a sword, you get +2 damage. Like that is not in this game, right? And the reason is, and therefore, hit points and stuff don't see like a 5th level monster versus like a 1st level monster might only have 1 or 2 extra wounds. They don't have a ton of extra health. They're just harder to hit. So it actually is a more lifelike and adaptive simulation because there's less scaling involved. And also there's things like damage reduction that you can take. There's lots of ways to get damage reduction or increase your armor value or whatever. So it's about the skill of your character and the powers you have versus just doing more and more and more.
Right.
Which is much easier from a design standpoint. You don't have to worry about like keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah, because you can kill high-level monsters, enemies, whatever, if you roll well, if you have the right powers or weapons or whatever, if you're prepared.
Right. So let's try to wrap this up. Last two things I want to talk about. We'll talk about. I'll say it real quick now. There is a monster manual in the core book, which is really great, as well as a build your own monster section. We won't dive into that right now, just because we're running long. But it's there. It's good. It's useful. So pretty much, you've got everything you need. Like I said, you've got everything you need in one book. Let's talk about magic real quick, because magic is awesome in this game, and I really want to talk about it. So magic in this is like you if you want to use magic, you pick up a power called the Apprentice Spellcaster. This gives you a number of spell schools equal to however many points you depending on how many points you put into the power itself. And the way it works is you get each of those schools at rank 3. Now the way magic works in this system is that it's not like D&D where you have to pick your spells for the day, or you have access only to a limited number of spells and a limited number of slots. Instead it's a mana system, which is always great. But what's really cool, and I really appreciate about this, is that as you level up your schools, you get access to all the spells that are of that level or lower. So say you had level 3 air and sound, you get access to all the spells at level 3 and lower, including Charged Javelin, Sphere of Turbulence, Silence, Zap, Parachute, Everbreathe, and Conductive Path. So if you're playing a heavy mage, 7 spells. So yeah, if you're playing a very magic-oriented character who's like a mage or something, and you took four schools of magic right out the gate, you have a massive toolkit of spells that you can play around with.
30.
Yeah, it's crazy.
A little less, 28.
It'll only grow as you gain in power.
Exactly, and that's another thing I like. So when we said earlier, when you can spend XP to increase your spell school, your spell schools.
Every level you get 10 BP. So
yeah. So whenever you spend XP to increase your spell school, whenever you raise a spell school, all spell schools of equal or lower level go up at the same time. So for example, let's go back to that example of the guy who took 4 spell schools right out the gate. He only needs to spend enough points to raise one of them, and all of them go up together, which is great, because then it's actually really viable to play a magic heavy person and not have all your XP sucked down by trying to keep all your spell schools up. It just all goes up together, meaning that you can become really powerful really fast.
You have access to a
Well,
lot of
more
spells.
like having a lot of options.
More like a lot of options, granted.
As your power goes up, so does your mana consumption.
This is true.
Basically, every spell level costs mana. So if you cast a level 1 spell, it costs 1 mana. If you cast if you cast a level 5 spell, it costs 5 mana. If you have 30 mana, you could cast 6 level 5 spells, or you can cast 30 level 1 spells, or some combination. And you can multi cast. You can cast multiple spells in a round, as long as they don't exceed your actions or exceed your overall level. If you have
Exactly.
level 6, you can cast 2 level 3 spells in a turn, a total of 6 mana. Burn your mana really quick. So there are 3 types of casters that you can make sort of intrinsically. Powerful casters that like have a lot of force behind what they're casting, meaning that they're gonna get their effects off more often. You can get casters at breadth, meaning they have a lot of options they can cast from, or casters who are spammy, meaning they can consistently deliver their spells because they have a lot of mana. But all these things require different values, which is really hard to be good at all of them. So basically, you can kind of get 2, 1.5, or 2 of them, spammy, potent, or versatile.
Right.
There's an invisible hand in the system, so that it keeps, even though the casting's really fun and can be very powerful, also sort of does control it and make it balanced.
You have to manage yourself, which is, I prefer that than trying to be like, oh, but what do I have for this slot
Yeah,
in
right.
this spell level?
That always has driven me away from playing a wizard.
It's the worst.
Trying to figure out,
so-
crap, I have no idea what I'm going to need for this game.
So,
Today.
Next, you get 1 mana back for every hour of rest. So typically speaking, characters will rest 8 hours in a day. There are no long rest or short rest or anything like that. So you just cast healing from whatever spells you have or don't have.
right.
So
Powers should speed that up, though.
There are powers that let you even just renew mana really quickly too, and
so there's some
potions and other
powers that
things
let
like
you
that.
get mana regardless of rest, and if you travel, you can get 1 mana back every 2 hours. But it's sort of like light. If you're just like walking the streets and you're not really doing anything, just like kind of looking around, you get 1 mana back every 2 hours. Basically, it kind of comes down to how often you're resting. Are you in a place where you can rest? So some of that is determined by the GM.
Okay, we're
One
pushing
of
2
the-
hours. Let's keep it moving. Sorry. So we got the spell schools available. You got a really nice selection. You got air and sound, blood and marrow, earth and rock, fire and flame, healing and body, limbo, matter and time, mind and memory, nature and wood, necromancy and energy, shadow spells, summoning spells, vigor and morale spells, which is great for bards, and water and ice spells. So,
I didn't hear limbo. Limbo spells.
yeah, limbo's in there. So yeah, there's a lot of schools, and you can you can mix and match what you want to take to get exactly the sort of mage that you want. And on the last thing that we'll get into real quick is crafting, because we won't go too deep on this, just because there is so much to crafting that it would be we could be talking about this a whole nother hour just talking about crafting, but we'll give the long and short of it. Crafting is relatively simple. You basically, between various stats and powers, as well as having henchmen and other things like that, you get a crafting level, and that determines what you can build of all manner of stuff. Everything from alchemical substances to armor and weapons, buildings, clothes, general items, grenades, magic items, traps, siege engines, ships, potions, poisons, even like
Anything
mechanical
listed in the book.
stuff.
Anything listed in the book you can craft.
Yeah, it's insane how much you can build, and on top of that, you can come up with your own creations to build and make like all sorts of nifty stuff. And a lot of it is basically determined. For the most part, it's just determined by, okay, how many craft levels do you have, and which is based on your mind and intellect and your craftsman power, and what are you trying to build, and how many levels is that going to require to build it. The only other thing is some of these other things also require spell schools and knowing various spell schools. Like for example, the mechnomantic objects require certain spell schools. The magic items require you can only build magic items that you know the magic of. So if you want to build a crafter, you gotta be very aware of what professions you're taking and what magic you're taking to be your most effective in building stuff.
One of the things that helps the magic system along is the component. So basically, magic items go from level 1 to level 10, and it tells you, it tells you what you can build. Like you can build a poison, making it last this long with this potency, with this kind of effect equals this many levels, right? So you go out and you start gathering things, a horn, an eyeball, weird roots, moss, flowing moss, whatever. As you grab those, the GM will tell you, okay, you harvested that eyeball is worth 3 levels of component. Okay? And may put stipulations on exactly how those levels are used or what they can be used for. So you might be able to make 1 level 3 poison from that eyeball, or it might work as 3 levels of a magic item, and now you need to get 3 other items to make a level 9 magic item.
Right.
And that's super simple to do because you just, all the GM has to be is like, okay, that's how many levels you get. And you write down the component, you write down the level, and that's it.
Yeah, so there you go. It's relatively accessible, but the depth on it is utterly insane in what you can build. And like again, there's all sorts of categories of things you can build too. So you can make all sorts of crazy stuff. And like even like I said, you can make buildings. So if you want to sort of like do base building and like make your own castle, make your own town, make your own whatever, that's totally an option. You could be explorer. You could totally be explorers and get out on the frontier and sort of set up a town and other things like that. It's cool. And I think that's where we'll call it for now because we're already pushing an hour 46 minutes. Thank you, Jeff, for coming on and talking about this with us. This game is awesome. There is so much to it. There is so much content. It is a densely packed tome of stuff and just everything you could possibly want for a fantasy campaign. It's got an accessible world that's nice and useful right out the gate. It's got everything you need in one book, and you can build exactly the sort of hero you want to play without having to go through a whole lot of hassle to make it happen.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
And I'll also say this book is available on Drive-Thru RPG for the PDF, and that's only I think it was like $15 last I checked.
I think it's 15.
15 for 400 pages, guys. You can't let this deal pass you by. This is insane. Like no one sells it for that cheap. On top of that, it's stuffed.
72 pages of tiled art. So if you actually take the art and tile it, that would make a 72-page book right there.
It's stuffed to the brim with all sorts of art. It's gorgeous. You've seen some of it as I've been flipping through this, and it's just so beautiful and gorgeous. Like it's worth it for the art alone, but you're getting a 400-page book game system with it too. Yeah, $15. It's a no-brainer, and you can also order it from Strange Machine Games website, which is Jeff's company, and that you can get the physical book for about $60 on there, I believe.
It's basically I don't make any profit.
Yeah, so it's good. It's good product, good price, and I believe there's a Kickstarter coming at some point soon, which will be Kickstarter
to figure it out.
Yeah.
With the COVID stuff.
Yeah, which will be coming at some point in the future, probably once COVID's over. Hooray for dating this episode. But it will be launching 2 more expansions, one for a section of the Incian Sphere and one for the Hokate Sphere, which is the next sphere and basically the next mainline book.
Steampunk, basically. Steampunk Yeah, Sphere, and it's basically it's all the same stuff that's in here. It's any kind of steampunk you'd ever want to do. It's probably the most comprehensive steampunk RPG book or supplement ever brought into the industry.
Bold words. All right, so with that, we'll end it here. Thanks for coming on, Jeff, and thank you, Dan, for being with me on yet another episode as my co-host. And we'll see you all next time on the next episode. Thank you for watching or listening, really, and bye for now.